Welcome to Thueringer for Farming Simulator 15. We now continue in our reading of The Octopus, A Story of California by Frank Norris, in Book 2, Chapter 2. "What do you say? Is it a go?" demanded Annixter jovially. "I thought I hated you all the time," she said, and the velvety huskiness of her voice never sounded so sweet to him. "And I thought it was that crockery-smashing goat of a loud of a cowpuncher." "Delaney? The idea! Oh, dear, I think it must always have been you." "Since when, Hilma?" he asked, putting his arm around her. "Ah, but it is good to have you, my girl," he exclaimed, delighted beyond words that she permitted this freedom. "Since when? Tell us all about it." "Oh, since always. It was ever so long before I came to think of you, to think about. I mean to remember. Oh, you know what I mean. But when I did, then." "Then what?" "I don't know. I haven't thought that way long enough to know." "But you said you thought it must have been me always." I know, but that was different. Oh, I'm all mixed up. I'm so nervous and trembling now. Oh," she cried suddenly, her face overcast with a look of earnestness and great seriousness, both her hands catching at his wrist. "Oh, you will be good to me now, won't you? I'm only a little child in so many ways, and I've given myself to you, all in a minute. And I can't go back of it now, and it's for always. I don't know how it happened or why. Sometimes I think I didn't wish it, but now it's done. And I am glad and happy. But now if you weren't good to me, think of how it would be with me. You are strong and big and rich, and I am only a servant of yours, a little nobody. And I've given all I had to you, myself. And you must be so good to me now. Always remember that. Be good to me and be gentle and kind to me in little things, in everything, or you will break my heart." Annixter took her in his arms. He was speechless. No words that he had at his command seemed adequate. All he could say was, "That's all right, little girl. Don't you be frightened. I'll take care of you. That's all right. That's all right." For a long time they sat there under the shade of the great trestle, their arms about each other, speaking only at intervals. An hour passed. The buckskin, finding no feed to her taste, took the trail stablewards, the bridle dragging. Annixter let her go. Rather than to take his arm from around Hilma's waist, he would have lost his whole stable. At last, however, he bestirred himself and began to talk. He thought it time to formulate some plan of action. "Well now, Hilma, what are we going to do?" "Do?" she repeated. "Why, must we do anything? Oh, isn't this enough?" "There's better ahead," he went on. "I want to fix you up somewhere where you can have a bit of a home all to yourself. Let's see, Bonneville wouldn't do. There's always a lot of yaps about there that know us, and they would begin to cackle first off. How about San Francisco? We might go up next week and have a look around. I would find rooms you could take somewheres, and we could fix them up as lovely as how do you do." "Oh, but why go away from Quien Sabe?" she protested. "And then so soon, too. Why must we have a wedding trip now that you are so busy? Wouldn't it be better? Oh, I tell you, we could go to Monterey after we were married for a little week where Mama's people live, and then come back here to the ranch house and settle right down where we are and let me keep house for you. I wouldn't even want a single servant." Annixter heard, and his face grew troubled. He said, "I see." He gathered up a handful of pebbles and began snapping them carefully into the creek. He felt thoughtful. Here was a phase of the affair he had not planned in the least. He had supposed all the time that Hilma took his meaning. His old suspicion that she was trying to get a hold of him stirred again for a moment. There was no good of such talk as that. Always, these female girls seemed crazy to get married, bent on complicating the situation. "Isn't that best?" said Hilma, glancing at him. "I don't know," he muttered gloomily. "Well, then, that's not. Let's come right back to King Sabe without going to Monterey. Anything that you want, I want." "I hadn't thought of it in just that way," he observed. "In what way, then?" Can't we wait about this marrying business?" "That's just it," she said gaily. "I said it was too soon. There would be so much to do between whiles. Why not say at the end of summer?" "Say what?" "Our marriage, I mean. We get married then? What's the good of all that fuss about it? I don't go anything upon a minister puddling around in my affairs. What's the difference anyhow? We understand each other, isn't that enough? Pshaw, Hilma, I'm no marrying man." She looked at him a moment, bewildered, and slowly she took his meaning. She rose to her feet, her eyes wide, her face paling with terror. He did not look at her, but he could hear the catch in her throat. "Oh," she exclaimed, with a long, deep breath, and again, "Oh," the back of her hand against her lips. It was a quick gasp of a veritable physical anguish. Her eyes brimmed over. Annixter rose, looking at her. "Well?" he said awkwardly. "Well?" Hilma leaped back from him with an instinctive recoil of her whole being, throwing out her hands in a gesture of defense, fearing she knew not what. There was as yet no sense of insult in her mind, no outraged modesty. She was only terrified. It was as though, searching for wildflowers, she had come suddenly upon a snake. She stood for a moment, spellbound, her eyes wide, her bosom swelling, then all at once turned and fled, darting across the plank that served for a footbridge over the creek, gaining the opposite bank, and disappearing with a brisk rustle of underbrush, such as might have been made by the flight of a frightened fawn. Abruptly, Annixter found himself alone. For a moment he did not move. Then he picked up his campaign hat, carefully creased its limp crown, and put it on his head and stood for a moment, looking vaguely at the ground on both sides of him. He went away without uttering a word, without change of countenance, his hands in his pockets, his feet taking great strides along the trail in the direction of the ranch house. He had no sight of Hilma again that evening, and the next morning he was up early and did not breakfast at the ranch house. Business of the League called him to Bonneville to confer with Magnus and the firm of lawyers retained by the League to fight the land-grabbing cases. An appeal was to be taken to the Supreme Court at Washington, and it was to be settled that day which of the cases involved should be considered as test cases. Instead of driving on, riding into Bonneville as he usually did, Annixter took an early morning train, the Bakersfield Fresno local at Guadalajara, and went to Bonneville by rail, arriving there at 20 minutes after 7 and breakfasting by appointment with Magnus de Eric and Osterman at the Yosemite House on Main Street. The conference of the committee with the lawyers took place in a front room of the Yosemite, one of the latter bringing with him his clerk, who made a stenographic report of the proceedings and took carbon copies of all letters written. The conference was long and complicated, the business transacted of the utmost moment, and it was not until 2 o'clock that Annixter found himself at liberty. However, as he and Magnus descended into the lobby of the hotel, they were aware of an excited and interested group collected about the swing doors that opened from the lobby of the Yosemite into the bar of the same name. Dyke was there. Even at a distance, they could hear the reverberation of his deep-toned voice, uplifted in wrath and furious expostulation. Magnus and Annixter joined the group, wondering, and all at once fell upon the first scene of a drama. That same morning, Dyke's mother had awakened him according to his instructions at daybreak. A consignment of his hop poles from the north had arrived at the freight office of the P&SW in Bonneville, and he was to drive in on his farm wagon and bring them out. He would have a busy day. "Hello, hello," he said as his mother pulled his ear to arouse him. "Morning, Mama." "It's time," she said. "After 5 already. Your breakfast is on the stove." He took her hand and kissed it with great affection. He loved his mother devotedly, quite as much as he did the little Tad. In their little cottage in the forest of green hops that surrounded them on every hand, the three led a joyous and secluded life, contented, industrious, happy, asking nothing better. Dyke himself was a big-hearted, jovial man who spread an atmosphere of good humor wherever he went. In the evenings, he played with Sidney like a big boy and older brother, lying on the bed or the sofa, taking her in his arms. Between them, they had invented a great game. The ex-engineer, his boots removed, his huge legs in the air, hoisted the little Tad on the soles of his stockinged feet, like a circus acrobat, dandling her there, pretending he was about to let her fall. Sidney, choking with delight, held on nervously with little screams and chirps of excitement while he shifted her gingerly from one foot to another, and thence the final act, the great gallery play, to the palm of one great hand. At this point, Mrs. Dyke was called in, both father and daughter, children both, crying out that she was to come in and look. She arrived out of breath from the kitchen, the potato masher in her hand. "Such children," she murmured, shaking her head at them, amused for all that, tucking the potato masher under her arm and clapping her hands. In the end, it was part of the game that Sidney should tumble down upon Dyke, whereat he invariably vented a great bellow as if in pain, declaring that his ribs were broken. Gasping, his eyes shut, he pretended to be in the extreme of dissolution. Perhaps he was dying. Sidney, always a little uncertain, amused but distressed, shook him nervously, tugging at his beard, pushing open his eyelids with one finger, imploring him not to frighten her, to wake up and be good. On this occasion, while yet he was half dressed, Dyke tiptoed into his mother's room to look at Sidney fast asleep in her little iron cot, her arm under her head, her lips parted. With infinite precaution he kissed her twice, and then finding one little stocking hung with its mate very neatly over the back of a chair, dropped it in a dime rolled up in a wad of paper. He winked all to himself and went out again, closing the door with exaggerated carefulness. He breakfasted alone, Mrs. Dyke pouring his coffee and handing him his plate of ham and eggs, and half an hour later took himself off in his springless skeleton wagon, humming a tune behind his beard and cracking the whip over the backs of his staid and solid farm horses. The morning was fine, the sun just coming up. He left Guadalajara, sleeping and lifeless on his left, and going around across lots over an angle of King Sabe, came out upon the upper road, a mile below the long trestle. He was in great spirits, looking about him over the brown fields, ruddy with the dawn. Almost directly in front of him, but far off, the gilded dome of the courthouse at Bonneville was glinting radiant in the first rays of the sun, while a few miles distant, toward the north, the venerable campanile of the Mission San Juan stood silhouetted in purplish black against the flaming east. As he proceeded, the great farm horses jogging forward, placid, deliberate, the countryside waked to another day. Crossing the irrigating ditch further on, he met a gang of Portuguese with picks and shovels over their shoulders, just going to work. Hooven, already abroad, shouted him a "Good morning" from behind the fence of Los Muertos. Far off toward the southwest, in the bare expanse of the open fields, where a clump of eucalyptus and cypress trees set a dark green note, a thin stream of smoke rose straight into the air from the kitchen of Derek's ranch houses. But a mile or so beyond the long trestle, he was surprised to see Magnus Derek's protege, the one-time shepherd Vanamy, coming across King Sabe by a trail from one of Annixter's division houses. Without knowing exactly why, Dyke received the impression that the young man had not been in bed all of that night. As the two approached each other, Dyke eyed the young fellow. He was distrustful of Vanamy, having the country-bred suspicion of any person he could not understand. Vanamy was, beyond doubt, no part of the life of ranch and country town. He was an alien, a vagabond, a strange fellow who came and went in mysterious fashion, making no friends, keeping to himself. Why did he never wear a hat? Why indulge in a fine black pointed beard when either a round beard or a mustache was the invariable custom? Why did he not cut his hair? Above all, why did he prowl about so much at night? As the two passed each other, Dyke, for all his good nature, was a little blunt in his greeting and looked back at the ex-shepherd over his shoulder. Dyke was right in his suspicion. Vanamy's bed had not been disturbed for 3 nights. On the Monday of that week, he had passed the entire night in the garden of the mission, overlooking the seed ranch in the little valley. Tuesday evening had found him miles away from that spot, in a deep arroyo in the Sierra foothills to the eastward, while Wednesday he had slept in an abandoned adobe on Osterman Stock Range, 20 miles from his resting place of the night before. The fact of the matter was that the old restlessness had once more seized upon Vanamy. Something began tugging at him. The spur of some unseen rider touched his flank. The instinct of the wanderer woke and moved. For some time now he had been a part of the Los Muertos staff. On King Sabe, as on the other ranches, the slack season was at hand. While waiting for the wheat to come up, no one was doing much of anything. Vanamy had come over to Los Muertos and spent most of his days on horseback, riding the range, rounding up and watching the cattle in the 4th Division of the ranch. But if the vagabond instinct now roused itself in the strange fellow's nature, a counter-influence had also set in. More and more Vanamy frequented the mission garden after nightfall, sometimes remaining there till the dawn began to whiten, lying prone on the ground, his chin on his folded arms, his eyes searching the darkness over the little valley of the seed ranch, watching. As the days went by, he became more reticent than ever. Presley often came to find him on the stock range, a lonely figure in the great wilderness of bare green hillsides, but Vanamy no longer took him into his confidence. Father Soria alone heard his strange stories. Dyke drove on toward Bonneville, thinking over the whole matter. He knew, as everyone did in that part of the country, the legend of Vanamy and Angel, the romance of the mission garden, the mystery of the other, Vanamy's flight to the deserts of the Southwest, his periodic returns, his strange, reticent, solitary character. But like many another of the country people, he accounted for Vanamy by a short and easy method. No doubt the fellow's wits were turned. That was the long and the short of it. The ex-engineer reached the post office in Bonneville towards 11 o'clock, but he did not at once present his notice of the arrival of his consignment at Ruggles' office. It entertained him to indulge in an hour's lounging about the streets. It was seldom he got into town, and when he did, he permitted himself the luxury of enjoying his evident popularity. He met friends everywhere, in the post office, in the drug store, in the barber shop, and around the courthouse. With each one, he held a moment's conversation. Almost invariably, this ended in the same way. "Come on and have a drink." "Well, I don't care if I do." And the friends proceeded to the Yosemite bar, pledging each other with punctilious ceremony. Dyke, however, was a strictly temperate man. His life on the engine had trained him well. Alcohol he never touched, drinking instead ginger ale, sarsaparilla and iron soft drinks. At the drugstore, which also kept a stock of miscellaneous stationery, his eye was caught by a transparent slate, a child's toy, whereupon a little pane of frosted glass one could trace with considerable elaboration outline figures of cows, plows, bunches of fruit, and even rural watermills that were printed on slips of paper underneath. "Now there's an idea, Jim," he observed to the boy behind the soda water fountain. "I know a little tad that would just about jump out of her skin for that. Think I'll have to take it with me." "How's Sidney getting along?" the other asked while wrapping up the package. Dyke's enthusiasm had made of his little girl a celebrity throughout Bonneville. The ex-engineer promptly became voluble, assertive, doggedly emphatic. "Smartest little tad in all Tulare County and more fun. A regular whole show in herself." "And the hops?" inquired the other. "Bully," declared Dyke, with the good-natured man's readiness to talk of his private affairs to anyone who would listen. "Bully. I'm dead sure of a bonanza crop by now. The rain came just right. I actually don't know as I can store the crop in those barns I've built. It's going to be so big. That foreman of mine was a daisy. Jim, I'm going to make money in that deal. After I've paid off the mortgage. You know I had to mortgage, yes, crop and homestead both, but I can pay it off and all the interest to boot lovely. Well, and as I was saying, after all expenses are paid off, I'll clear big money, my son. Yes, sir. I knew there was a boodle in hops. You know the crop is contracted for already. Sure, the foreman managed that. He's a daisy. Chap in San Francisco will take it all and at the advanced price. I wanted to hang on to see if it wouldn't go to 6 cents, but the foreman said, no, that's good enough. So I signed. Ain't it bully, hey? Then what'll you do? Well, I don't know. I'll have a layoff for a month or so and take the little tad and mother up and show 'em to the city, Frisco, until it's time for the schools to open, and then we'll put Sid in the seminary in Marysville. Catch on? I suppose you'll stay right by hops now? Right you are, my son. I know a good thing when I see it. There's plenty others going into hops next season. I set 'em the example. Wouldn't be surprised if it came to be a regular industry hereabouts. I'm planning ahead for next year myself. I can let the foreman go now that I've learned the game myself, and I think I'll buy a piece of land off Keensaw Bay and get a bigger crop, and build a couple more barns, and by George, in about 5 years' time, I'll have things humming. I'm going to make money, Jim. He emerged once more into the street and went up the block leisurely, planting his feet squarely. He fancied that he could feel he was considered of more importance nowadays. He was no longer a subordinate or an employee. He was his own man, a proprietor, an owner of land, furthering a successful enterprise. No one had helped him. He had followed no one's lead. He had struck out unaided for himself, and his success was due solely to his own intelligence, industry, and foresight. He squared his great shoulders till the blue gingham of his jumper all but cracked. Of late his great blond beard had grown, and the work in the sun had made his face very red. Under the visor of his cap, relic of his engineering days, his blue eyes twinkled with vast good nature. He felt that he made a fine figure as he went by a group of young girls in lawns and muslins and garden hats on their way to the post office. He wondered if they looked after him, wondered if they heard that he was in a fair way to become a rich man. But the chronometer in the window of the jewelry store warned him the time was passing. He turned about and, crossing the street, took his way to Ruggles' office, which was the freight as well as the land office of the P&SW Railroad. As he stood for a moment at the counter in front of the wire partition, waiting for the clerk to make out the order for the freight agent at the depot, Dyke was surprised to see a familiar figure in conference with Ruggles himself by a desk inside the railing. The figure was that of a middle-aged man, fat, with a great stomach which he stroked from time to time. As he turned about, addressing a remark to the clerk, Dyke recognized S. Behrman. The banker, railroad agent, and political manipulator seemed to the ex-engineer's eyes to be more gross than ever. His smooth-shaven jowls stood out big and tremulous on either side of his face. The roll of fat on the nape of his neck, sprinkled with sparse, stiff hairs, bulged out with greater prominence. His great stomach, covered with a light brown linen vest, stamped with innumerable interlocked horseshoes, protruded far in advance, enormous, aggressive. He wore his inevitable round-topped hat of stiff brown straw, varnished so bright that it reflected the light of the office windows like a helmet, and even from where he stood, Dyke could hear his loud breathing and the clink of the hollow links of his watch chain upon the vest buttons of imitation pearl as his stomach rose and fell. Dyke looked at him with attention. There was the enemy, the representative of the trust with which Derek's league was locking horns. The great struggle had begun to invest the combatants with interest. Daily, almost hourly, Dyke was in touch with the ranchers and wheat growers. He heard their denunciations, their growls of exasperation and defiance. Here was the other side, this placid fat man with a stiff straw hat and linen vest, who never lost his temper, who smiled affably upon his enemies, giving them good advice, commiserating with them in one defeat after another, never ruffled, never excited, sure of his power, conscious that back of him was the machine, the colossal force, the inexhaustible coffers of a mighty organization vomiting millions to the League's thousands. The League was clamorous, ubiquitous, its objects known to every urchin on the streets, but the trust was silent, its ways inscrutable. The public saw only results. It worked on in the dark, calm, disciplined, irresistible. Abruptly, Dyke received the impression of the multitudinous ramifications of the Colossus. Under his feet, the ground seemed mined. Down there below him, in the dark, the huge tentacles went silently twisting and advancing, spreading out in every direction, sapping the strength of all opposition, quiet, gradual, biding the time to reach up and out and grip with a sudden unleashing of gigantic strength. "I'll be wanting some cars of you people before the summer is out," observed Dyke to the clerk as he folded up and put away the order that the other had handed him. He remembered perfectly well that he had arranged the matter of transporting his crops some months before, but his role of proprietor amused him, and he liked to busy himself again and again with the details of his undertaking. "I suppose," he added, "you'll be able to give 'em to me. There'll be a big wheat crop to move this year, and I don't want to be caught in any car famine." "Oh, you'll get your cars," murmured the other. "I'll be the means of bringing business your way," Dyke went on. "I've done so well with my hops that there are a lot of others going into the business next season. Suppose," he continued, struck with an idea, "suppose we went into some sort of pool, a sort of shippers' organization. Could you give us a special cheaper rates, say 1.5 cents?" The other looked up. 1.5 cents. Say 4.5 cents, and maybe I'll talk business with you. 4.5 cents, returned Ike. I don't see it. Why, the regular rate is only 2 cents. No, it isn't, answered the clerk, looking at him gravely in the eye. It's 5 cents. Well, there's where you are wrong, my son, Ike retorted genially. You look it up. You'll find the freight on hops from Bonneville to Frisco is 2 cents a pound for carload lots. You told me that yourself last fall. That was last fall, observed the clerk. There was a silence. Ike shot a glance of suspicion at the other. Then, reassured, he remarked, You look it up. You'll see I'm right. S. Behrman came forward and shook hands politely with the ex-engineer. Anything I can do for you, Mr. Dyke? Dyke explained. When he had done speaking, the clerk turned to S. Behrman and observed respectfully, Our regular rate on hops is 5 cents. Yes, answered S. Behrman, pausing to reflect. Yes, Mr. Dyke, that's right, 5 cents. The clerk brought forward a folder of yellow paper and handed it to Dyke. It was inscribed at the top, Tariff Schedule Number 8, and underneath these words, in brackets, was a smaller inscription, Supersedes Number 7 of August 1st. See for yourself, said S. Behrman. He indicated an item under the head of miscellany. The following rates for carriage of hops and carload lots, read Dyke, take effect June 1, and will remain in force until superseded by a later tariff. Those quota beyond Stockton are subject to changes in traffic arrangements with carriers by water from that point. In the list that was printed below, Dyke saw that the rate for hops between Bonneville or Guadalajara and San Francisco was 5 cents.